Two friends just made a podcast. Two good friends just made a podcast. Two friends just made a podcast. It's called Culture Bucket. Two friends just made a podcast. Two good friends just made a podcast. Two friends just made a podcast. Culture Bucket, Georgia and Alex.
Hi all, hello, welcome back to your favourite podcast, officially recognised statistically as the favourite podcast of at least 3 people. Spotify has proven that to be the case.
Yep.
Spotify's Wrapped feature came out this week and 3 people have got us in their number 1 podcast position.
Woohoo!
Incredible scenes.
Incredible, all around.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to Chris, Emma and Matt for being brilliant.
Thank you. You're the best.
Yeah, thank you. Please carry on listening to us.
Yeah.
This is the 55th episode of the podcast known as Culture Bucket. It's going to be a good one. We're going to do a deep dive into one of the best films released in 2021, Dune, Denis Villeneuve's Dune. It's an adaptation of a book. Good stuff. But first we're going to mix it up a little bit, because why keep things rigid and static? Why not just try new things and experiment? Although by trying a new thing, we're going to kind of incorporate a small old thing into the start of our newer thing. With a little mini culture catch-up, tiny little culture catch-up for you, little bite-sized culture catch-up, couple of movies to discuss. Who's going to start? Does it matter? Doesn't really matter. Alex or
Are you going
me?
to say hello to me or no?
Oh, I forgot about that part. Because you stopped me in my flow before and it's thrown me off.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Alex is my co-host. If you've heard the podcast before, Alex is my co-host. She is pretty great and joins me each week to discuss popular culture, lists and deep dives and such. Really good stuff from Alex. Say hi, Alex.
Hi, George. Hi, everyone. You forgot about me, George. That's not good, is it?
No, because we've already been talking for a little bit. I just forgot that we hadn't introduced you. So, Alex, what do you have to talk about this week?
I wanted to talk about a film called The Kitchen that I watched this week, and
nice.
The trailer is amazing. So as soon as I watched the trailer, I was like, I'm gonna definitely watch it. And also, there's Melissa McCarthy, which I really like. Tiffany Haddish, Elizabeth Moss. George's favorite, and I really like her in this. I think she's great.
How does she smell in it? How does she smell in?
I'm gonna watch the film
kitchen?
again with subtitles, so then I can understand what's going on. Okay, and then there's also Donal Gleeson, and who else? People, but the 3 main people are Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, and Elizabeth Moss. And it's about these 3 women who are married to Irish gangsters in Hell's Kitchen in the 1970s, and they get arrested, and after getting arrested, in kind of like in any mafia from anywhere in the world, usually the family will help you out, because these 3 women were not working, so the family
I've seen The Sopranos.
So the family was going to help them out. However, they realized that the amount of money they were going to receive was not enough to survive, so these 3 women kind of take over the family business, which it's good for them but not good for the men. And and that's the film, just this. And so I think it's based on a DC graphic novel of the same name.
Okay.
And I feel like watch this film in two ways. You can watch it as being a little bit, not realistic or a bit, or you can watch it as a DC graphic novel, and I think it really works, and I really really liked it, and the performances from Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, and Elizabeth Moss is great. They've got great chemistry, and they're believable as friends, and I think it's really good and interesting and fun to watch, and a bit violent, of course, and I really liked it. But I went on Rotten Tomatoes and it's got a really terrible score, and I don't know why. It makes no sense that a film like this would have such a terrible score. I'll tell you what, it's got 1 star on Rotten Tomatoes, and the percentage is 23%, which is insane. And
and it's got a 69% audience score, which is, it's always slightly odd when there's such a big disparity between the critics' reviews and the audience's reviews.
Yeah.
And in fact, often when it's a movie about sort of powerful women, it tends to be the other way around. It tends to be quite a high critics score and then a very low audience score, because all of the people that I don't agree with politically come out of the woodwork to try and give it a bad score. So that's interesting. It's got a high audience score.
Yeah, but I thought it was great. I thought it was fun, and it was well made. It was a good couple of hours of entertainment, and there was a bit of drama. And there's one of the critics that says the characters are all one-dimensional, which is really ridiculous, because when the husbands go to jail, the characters change completely. So I'm not really sure what film this guy watched.
And also, if it's based on a comic book, I mean, comic books obviously can have a lot of depth, but like people don't pick up on the Marvel movies don't have like really well drawn 3-dimensional characters all the time. Like, that's not necessarily the worst thing for a film to have slightly, like if it's a flashy sort of comic book based film, I don't think that having, Citizen Kane level characterization is necessarily required.
Yeah. And also, it's the director debut of Andrea Berloff, and I think she did a great job. She did really well, and I liked it. They all bounced off each other. The three actresses. Tiffany Haddish is amazing. It's amazing the journey that she's made, and I love seeing her. And I thought it was good. So if you haven't watched The Kitchen, watch The Kitchen, because don't listen to Rotten Tomatoes. And look, and I think if you watch it as an adaptation from a graphic novel, you appreciate it more, because it does have that feel of like a graphic novel, and it's not. I don't understand why it was hated so much, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, fair play. I'm going to try and watch that movie, because it's been on my list for a while, because I've always thought it looked like it would be quite good, and I've been wondered why the reviews are so bad for it. So I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah,
yeah, man. Cool. So I've just got a couple of movies to talk about quickly. First of all, I went to the cinema yesterday and saw a movie called Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City.
What? Raccoon?
Yeah, that's the name of the name of the city in the Resident Evil games. Because of course the Resident Evil games are developed in Japan but set in America, so you end up with sort of people going, what would a city be called in America? Raccoon City? They have raccoons there, right? We'll call it Raccoon City.
Amazing.
But yeah, that's lifted from the games. I mean, you're aware. What's your awareness of Resident Evil as a thing?
Zero. I know. Okay. No. I know Mila Jovovich used to be
Mila. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Is her name Jovovich?
I think it's Jovovich. I think it's a soft J. But,
so Mila Jovovich was in Resident Evil, and that's why I know Resident Evil, because I loved her in The Fifth Element. And so when that came out, I was like, oh, fine, fantastic. But then I realised that is not one thing that I should watch, Resident Evil. So
Well, I mean, you say that, but you like zombie movies. It's a zombie thing.
Yeah, but then I got into zombie movies later, and I by that
Okay,
time
okay.
then yeah. But
Well,
it, is Mila Jovovich still in it?
no, thank you very much. So
Why is she not good?
no, I'll explain briefly.
Okay,
So
sorry.
Resident Evil is a survival horror video game franchise developed by Capcom. It's had an almost uncountable number of games, but in the main sort of numbered series has been 8 from Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Biohazard, and then this year's 8 Village, which is probably the best game of 2021. Such a good game. Oh my god, play it if you haven't played it. So huge kind of name in the gaming world. It's influenced and based on B movies. It's a very schlocky. The first game that came out in the mid 90s had live action cutscenes in it with really awful acting and famously terrible dialogue, such as "Here, Jill, take this lockpick as you are the master of unlocking." A sentence that a human would say, and sort of became iconic for, fun zombie nonsense action. It's all about this evil corporation called Umbrella that has developed a virus that is sort of turning people into zombie mutant things, etc. And it's good, schlocky, silly monster fun. Then Hollywood got involved and made a movie called Resident Evil, based supposedly on the games, starring Mila Jovovich as a character called Alice. And the first game is set in a mansion. And the first Resident Evil movie with Mila Jovovich opens with her waking up in a mansion, but her character doesn't exist in the games. And very quickly she goes into a secret lab underneath the mansion, and it stops having really any resemblance to the games at all.
Oh.
And then they made 7 movies where various characters would turn up who were named after characters in the games, but it was all so far removed from the games that it was like its own thing. And they were, in fits and starts, kind of okay, but also pretty bad B movies. And the final one came out about 4 or 5 years ago. It was called Resident Evil Final Chapter, and it's really a really terrible movie. But I will occasionally watch them because Mila Jovovich is, like you say, great.
Yeah.
But as adaptations of the video game Resident Evil, they are pretty poor. So now we've got this reboot directed by Johan Roberts, who is sort of a director that's made a few horror movies I've quite enjoyed. He made the sequel to The Strangers called Strangers Prey at Night, which is a really good, quite violent slasher movie. And he made a good shark movie that I watched quite recently called 47 Meters Down. So he's got previous in the world of horror. And very much the talk around this one was that it was going to be faithful to the games. It was going to be an actual adaptation of the video games. And as trailers came out, quite recently, actually, they waited a while to release trailers, it became clear that, it was sort of much closer to the games. So I was interested to see it. The cast is interesting. You've got Robbie Amell playing a character called Chris Redfield, who's quite important in the games. There's a famous scene in Resident Evil 5 where he punches a boulder and destroys it. That sadly isn't dramatised in this movie. You got Hannah John Kamen, who is in... Have you seen Ant-Man and the Wasp?
Yeah.
You know Ghost in that movie, the sort of villain. She plays that character in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she's in this movie playing Jill Valentine, who is one of the biggest and most important characters in the whole franchise. You got Kea Scodelario, an actress I like quite a bit for a movie. She made a movie called Crawl, which is she's trapped in a house with a crocodile in a storm.
She used to be in Skins.
Did she?
Yeah, she was in Skins, like the second generation of Skins. She was the little sister.
Okay. Well, she's good in Crawl, and I really enjoyed her in this movie, actually. She plays Claire Redfield, Chris's brother. Again, a really important character. Then you got Avon Yogia, a guy who I've never seen anything before, playing Leon S. Kennedy, who is probably the most important Resident Evil character. So they're bringing in, straight away off the top of the bat, everyone who's important. Tom Hopper plays Wesker, who's a big character in the games, big kind of villain. And Donal Logue plays the police chief. So the first video game is set in a mansion. The second video game is set in the police department of Raccoon City, inside the police station. This movie kind of in under 2 hours attempts to adapt the stories of both of those games into one film, whereby some characters end up going off to this mansion to investigate that, and then other characters are stuck in the police station, running around, and it's filled from front to back with references to the games. Like, as much as the old Milla Jovovich films ignored the games, this film is determined to be a love letter to the fans of the games. And it's come out and been absolutely sort of slated and mauled by the critics, and fans aren't happy with it. And honestly, I don't understand why. I had a really good time with this movie. I thought it was good. Similar to your... You know, this is good. This is a movie that's got 28% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, but 66%. Yeah, but a 66% audience score, and I much more come down on the side of the audience. And partly because as I was watching it, I was listening to the score of the movie, which is very synth heavy, and I was like, this is pretty John Carpenter-y. This is an interesting choice. And then the fonts used on the titles, and when words come up on screen in the movie, I was like, I swear that's a John Carpenter font. And then there's a whole bit where I was like, this is just like Assault on Precinct 13. And all the way through the movie, I was like, this is so oddly John. And then when I came home and looked at the movie, like all of the trivia on IMDb for it is like, the director is a big fan of John Carpenter, and he did this, this, and this. And I was like, I felt a little bit kind of... snobbishly proud of myself for being able to watch it and be like, I can see these John Carpenter references creeping into this movie. So I had a blast with it, like in terms of just suddenly realising, as well as a Resident Evil film, it was some huge John Carpenter love letter riff thing. So yeah, I love that about it. I love the fact it's a John Carpenter riff. And in the way of John Carpenter, who was the least pretentious filmmaker of all time, hated any level of pretension, hated symbolism, hated all these things, just wanted his movies to be entertainment or to be about what they were about. He was very, very lacking in pretension. This movie is the same. It's a B movie. It's based on games that are B movie inspired games. Like, people expecting them to come out with this masterpiece Resident Evil movie are playing themselves. Like, this is the level of film we should be expecting. It's a goofy, cheesy, slightly messy, ridiculous nonsense time, and that's kind of what a lot of the Resident Evil games are, and that's kind of what I would want from a Resident Evil movie. It's got a lot of cool... I just think it's fun. The genuine complaint I have is the CGI in it is bad, and there is a final boss sort of character that turns up at the end that is one of the worst, genuinely probably the worst movie monster I've seen on screen in like my entire life. It looks awful. And nothing like... It looks like it should be in a CGI animated movie. It doesn't fit on a live action sort of... It's bad. But other than that, like, the performances I really enjoyed. Like, some of the actors don't look like their video game counterparts. Like Leon in particular looks very different, but his performance I really enjoyed. And it's again another John Carpenter reference. The character of Leon is modelled after Kurt Russell's character in Big Trouble in Little China, which you can kind of tell when you're watching it, and that's really fun. So yeah, I think people should give Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City a good old try. Go and watch it. Help a sequel get made, because I'd happily watch more movies that are reverent to the games in the way that this film is. So yeah, good stuff. That's Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. And then the next film we're going to talk about briefly is a film that's been quite contentious release across the entire world, across this friendship, amongst just everyone in the world. You haven't seen it yet.
No, I haven't.
I went... Along with watching Resident Evil Raccoon City yesterday, I also went to the cinema to see Ridley Scott's latest offering, his second cinematic offering of the year after The Last Duel, and I managed to stay away from my phone long enough to watch it. It is, of course, House of Gucci.
House of Gucci. Yeah. I want to know what it felt like. The only kind of opinion that I've read or listened to was Mark Kermode's opinion, saying that it was...
What did he think of the movie?
He said it was an okay film. Lady Gaga is incredible, and of course, the great Adam Driver is incredible. Just having
he's
him
so good in everything.
Sitting somewhere is incredible. Like, it's so good.
Although I read a review that said Adam Driver does it in an English accent, and he doesn't. He's doing an Italian accent. I don't know what that person was on. He is still doing an accent. It just isn't like Jared Leto's
Yeah,
why'd
and that's the
you
thing.
do
What
this
Mark
to
Kermode
me?
said, which is amazing. Mark Kermode goes, the real bad thing about the film was Jared Leto, and he
Oh.
said something like Leto needs to remember that he's acting with other people and he's not by himself. Wanting to be the best, and apparently he's got like a really squeaky, horrible voice.
He's got this high pitched. Well, it's a chic.
Talk to me.
He's very bad. He's very bad. But the
Yeah.
two good things about him in the movie is the very first scene he's introduced, which is, a good chunk of time into the movie. So you get a good amount of film before you have to put up with him. And then in
Yeah.
the first scene he's introduced, within seconds, he's rugby tackled to the ground and has a bloody nose, which is sort of what you want to do as soon as you see him in the movie.
Yeah.
And then there's a scene closer to the end of the film where Al Pacino, who's playing his dad in the movie, screams at him in a way that only Al Pacino is capable of screaming. And I feel like there was some real genuine. I think in that moment it wasn't Aldo Gucci screaming. I think it was Al Pacino screaming at Jared Leto, and it was it was an enjoy. I almost had to look away. It was so awkward when he screamed at him in this bit of the film. I was like, oh my god, Al Pacino's really angry at Jared Leto.
Of course,
for good reason.
Would you not
He's
be?
terrible. Yeah, if I had to act opposite that absolute maniac, I would be upset. I mean, the guy. He said I read an interview of him before the movie came out where he says 3 or 4 incredibly offensive things about Italy, and then says that the performance is his love letter to Italy. Because obviously, every film Jared Leto does, he has to method act. So in this one, he said that he method acted so much, he got so ready for the role of Paolo Gucci. Is it Paolo that he's playing in the film? Is that the name of the guy? I think it is Paolo Gucci. He got so prepared for this role that he was, and these are his words, and I think that this is. I mean, I can't see that Italian. I mean, you can tell me more than I can, but this sounds offensive to me. He said that he was snorting lines of arrabbiata sauce, that his skin was leaking olive oil, like any Italian, and that if you had done a biopsy of his skin, it would have come back 80%. This is so insane. It would have come back 80% Parmesan cheese. And then he said, it's my love letter to Italy, which is, I mean, what's your take on that statement?
That means that every morning I wake up and I put arrabbiata sauce up my nose. Like, it's quite weird. It's quite weird. It's like saying if you're acting as an American or an English person, or you go, every morning I stuffed pancakes up my nostrils and I put a sausage in my mouth. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird.
Every
isn't
morning
it?
I shower in tea.
It's so stereotypical. It's like, I'm like so Italian. I exude. Is that the word? Am I being Nigella? I exude olive oil. Can you see my olive oil out of my on my skin, George? I bathe in olive oil every day.
It's pretty gross.
He's so out of touch. He's so into his. He's so bizarre. Like, he used to be a good actor, and then something happened.
He won an Oscar.
And now he's just, and what Mark Kermode said, that he needs to remember that he's acting with other people, is so true, because because he said that the energy that Jared Leto gives is completely different to all the other actors. So that means he's not a good actor, because you're supposed to have some kind of, like I said before with the kitchen, there was a really nice chemistry between the 3 main characters, and that's what you need. But he's just acting by himself and goes, because every Italian speaks like that.
Horrendous. Although he's not the only one guilty of the method acting sin. Although I don't know if method acting is always a bad thing, but Lady Gaga also supposedly used her accent for 9 months to prepare for the... Have you read that either?
Yeah, well, I saw her on an interview on Graham Norton, and she said that she found it easier to keep the accent than to swap, and she said it was just easier, and I kind of understand that.
Yeah, I think the trailer does her a disservice. It makes her look worse than she's in the
Okay.
movie. For example, there's that scene in the trailer that you've quoted at me before where she goes, I
Yeah.
never considered myself a particularly ethical person,
Yeah.
but I am
Yeah.
Thea.
Yeah.
And you said she sounds like she's a KGB agent. And I read an article in the Independent, I think it was the Independent online, where they were talking about Italian people's reactions to the film, and that mentioned that Italian people think she sounds Russian in it. I was like, oh, Alex was okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That apparently that yeah, you are obviously you're right because you know better than I do. But I was just interested to see that that's the general response. But in the movie, that's that moment. Like in the trailer, that moment is like all the music's building up to it, and it's like boom, 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 and then it cuts to Lady Gaga, and she goes, "Oh, I'm an ethical person, but I am fair." In the movie, that's just like that's played much more of just a tossed off moment. It's not given this big, and it like as just part of a scene that just floats past you. It's fine. And the same's true of the bit where she goes, bravo, and slaps her hands, and where she says father, son, and house of... All of those bits in the trailer are given this kind of, like, look at this incredible, powerful moment. But in the film, they're all just moments that sort of float by. Because really, I mean, I didn't really like the film particularly. I think I gave it 2.5 stars on Letterboxd.
Oh my goodness. Is it that bad?
It's... Other than Jared Leto, everyone in it is brilliant. Like Jeremy Irons is great in that film. Adam Driver is Oscar-winning worthy performance. Lady Gaga like holds the entire movie together. Her character starts off as like a young in her early 20s and goes for she kind of plays this character across a number of years, and she does it brilliantly, and you really see that journey that she goes on. Yeah. And I think she's brilliant in the movie, and if she won an Oscar for it, it would be absolutely fine. Although I feel like this movie might end up not being much of an Oscar contender because it just isn't a very good film. And Al Pacino is wonderful. Like he's just such a sort of like he's the guy. Al Pacino is the guy that Jared Leto wants to be. Jared Leto wants to be Al Pacino, but he's not, and he never ever will be.
Yeah.
But the problem is the movie's 2.5 hours long, and it gets so lost in the weeds with, like, it's been sold as the story of, is she called Patricia Reggiani?
Yeah.
Patricia Reggiani. The movie's been sold as the tale of her marriage to Mauricio Gucci. I really am sorry about my mangling of these names.
You have to use I'll teach you some Italian. Really high pitch. And then you have to move your hands like this, and you have to say, Patrizia Reggiani. That's how you do it.
Maurizio, why do you do this to me? I just want to design my own clothes. It's chic.
Perfect. I think you're definitely ready to move to Italy.
Good. So she is, she like all of those performances are great, but the movie, it's not the story. It's not the tight, interesting relationship drama / thriller about a woman murdering a husband that it should be. Instead, it wants to be this epic tale of this family, of the entire Gucci family. It wants to tell the story. So it gets really lost in the weeds with like, Aldo Gucci wanting to expand into shopping centres, and is it Rodolfo Gucci wants to remain in museums, and then like it goes into how Tom Ford came in and saved the company, and then like businessmen from the Middle East come in and start to buy it up, and etc. 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 And I was bored by that. I found a lot of it really dull. I'm not particularly interested in the ins and outs of the high fashion world. I'm more interested in the trashy story of this sort of because Patricia Reggiani murders her husband, not a very nice person. Maurizio Gucci, equally pretty bad guy based on the way he's portrayed by Adam Driver in the movie. Like, sort of the movie makes it appear that like he just abandons his family effectively. Yeah. And like how true that is, I know that like the Gucci family's not happy with it, etc., etc. But like it could be a trashy, fun, campy film, and in parts it is that. I mean, the soundtrack is like in the trailer it uses the Blondie track and stuff like that, right? Like that Blondie track. Often they'll use songs like that in the trailer for films, and then it's not in the film itself. This film is filled with musical moments like that, like music drops of
lovely.
Like classic 80s tracks, and that stuff's really good, and that stuff could be brilliant. And then you'll just have 20 minutes of Jared Leto whinging about the fact that he's not allowed to design his own clothes, and it's like, good lord. So that's why I gave it 2.5 straight down the middle, because parts of it are really entertaining, and if it was an hour 45 minutes long, it might be brilliant, but it's 2 hours and a half, and it's a bit of a slog to get through. Are you going to watch it?
Oh, I think I will. I think I will a little bit. Yeah, I want to watch it just because, I can't have a strong opinion about things without watching them.
That's true.
But I do have a strong opinion on the accent and Jared Leto thinking that he's the greatest. Oh, he's just, and I think also because he thinks he's so great. I think he feels sometimes like I was telling George before. That there's the scene where they say the father, the son, and the house of Gucci. There was an interview with Lady Gaga and Jared Leto, and Lady Gaga goes, it was something we made up during filming, and Jared Leto just turns to her and goes, well, it was improv. It's like, and it's just shut up, Jared. Who are you? Don't talk to that like that to Lady Gaga. She if she was good in this film, which is a bad film, then, and you're the worst part of this film, shut up.
Yeah.
Just shut up. Let her
completely.
speak, because we already know that Lady Gaga is a great actor.
Yeah.
We have realized that. And so you, Jared, you're not a great actor anymore. You need to be quiet. And if Lady Gaga says, we made this up, you say, yes, we did. And you shut up.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, the thing with the accents is, like, if it was the sort of trashy, campy movie that parts of it should be, I think the accents would work in the same way that they work in Jojo Rabbit, because it's creating this high, unreal world.
Yeah.
But then so much of it is very self-serious and dramatic that the silly accents, not necessarily, like, I don't think, like, Adam Driver's accent isn't silly, but then Jared Leto's accent is exceptionally silly to my ears. This is like how I interpret it. It just doesn't fit with the film in a lot of ways. So it's a pity. Out of the two movies Ridley Scott made this year, I think this has been the one that's been far more talked about and probably make more money. But I think that The Last Duel, which is now on Disney Plus, at least in the UK for people to watch, The Last Duel is
watch it.
Far and away the better film. Like, I really enjoyed The Last Duel. Despite Ridley Scott recently saying that it failed because of millennials always being on their phones, which is a very strange thing to say.
That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. And that's Mark Commode was talking about. It's like, I'm not a millennial. And I was looking at my phone. So, don't talk about that. Come on. I think, once upon a time, films were not 2.5 hours long, Ridley Scott. And and... what's the guy that did the Wolf of Wall Street?
Scorsese.
Yeah, you and Scorsese keep doing like 6-hour-long films that anybody can get bored with them,
Well, anybody can enjoy them. I like them. I liked The Irishman and I liked The Last Duel. Like, I don't mind a really long movie.
And you're a millennial.
Exactly.
Actually, I think us millennials are probably better with these films because we grew up with long films.
Yeah. And like, also, the new Spider-Man movie is coming out soon, and that's 2.5 hours long. So, like, Disney are assuming that millennials can cope with that. And
and all the Marvel films.
Yeah, all the Marvel movies are like
Endgame,
4
that was
days
like
long and
endless.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a silly thing to say. But whatever. It is what it is. Right, let's move on. I've got a quick MyTube to share with you because I'm interested to know what you think of this band. So this is a band they've just announced their debut album. They've not yet. They've only put out 4 songs, but I've only really discovered them this week. Sorry, this is really sort of just messy. But have you watched, or have you any interest in watching that Beatles documentary that's just popped up that everyone in the world is talking about?
I've not heard of it.
You've not
Everybody in the
heard of
world?
it?
No.
Honestly, you've not heard of it.
I've not heard of it.
Get Back.
I've not heard of it.
All right, it's on Disney Plus, and it's. Do you know the
Have you
album
watched
Let
it?
It Be? I've watched some of it. Do you know Let It Be by the Beatles? The album.
Yeah.
So that album originally, when they recorded it in front of cameras for a movie that came out called Let It Be. That's like an hour and a half long.
Okay.
That's not very good, and it's just a bunch of performances. But they filmed the whole process over like 24 days of them in the studio recording this album, like 150 hours of, or 60 hours of footage and 150 hours of audio was recorded. Peter Jackson, the filmmaker, got hold of all of this footage and has produced an 8.5 hour long TV documentary documenting this 25-day long, process. And it's an interesting thing because a lot of Beatles fans are absolutely in love with it because it's this perfect way to just see, the creative process of the Beatles. But like it is quite patience testing because a lot of it is footage of just them sat around bickering. So I've watched an hour and a half of it so far, and it's intermittently quite dull, and then has moments in it like you need to see it just to see this bit where, out of nowhere, Paul McCartney's just sat with this guitar, and literally out of nowhere, the song Get Back just kind of erupts out of this jam that he's doing and turns into Get Back, one of the the biggest and most famous pop songs of all time. And seeing that song just sort of slowly emerge out of this sort of jam session is like goosebump inducingly cool. So you should look it up and have a look at it. But it is it's going to take me a while to watch it because the rest of it is just them going. It's in 3 episodes. Each episode is like 2.5 hours long.
Oh
yeah. So I've just watched like an hour and then broken off. But like my brother who loves the Beatles watched the whole thing in a day.
I love living in this country because nothing arrives. Nothing.
That'll be on Disney. If you look at Disney Plus, that'll be on there definitely.
No. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll check it out. But amazing.
But
I did not know
a lot of it is
about
them just being like, "Oh, I watched an interesting thing on BBC Two last night." Oh, really, George? What was? And then suddenly out of nowhere, like someone will quit the band and it will get really dramatic for 5 minutes. Anyway, let's go back into MyTube. So this band, they're from the Isle of Wight. They're called Wet Leg. Wet Leg, and they've sort of their music could be, like this song I'm about to play you almost feels, or you're about to watch, it almost feels a bit like a novelty song. Like the lyrics are quite silly, but it's very, very catchy. It's been stuck in my head since I first heard it, and the music video is quite good. And then I think the music behind them is actually very good as well. I think they're quite good musicians. So I'm just interested to know what you think of it because I think you might quite like it, or you'll hate it. But I've sent it you now. Let me know when you're ready to start it, and we'll watch it.
Okay, so I'm clicking on it, and there's a bit of advertising.
I got a free YouTube Premium 3-month subscription, so I've not had to put up with that.
So I can press play anytime.
Okay, let's 3, 2, 1, go.
So I'm watching Wet Leg.
Wet Leg, and the song's called Wet Dream.
It's really random. They're wearing like
lobsters,
lobster claws. So it's a band, 5-piece band.
I think it's mainly the 2 women. I think they're sort of the band, or at least like the faces of the band and the songwriters, I think. But they've got a really odd vibe that's halfway funny and then halfway quite sort of, I don't know, something else.
I quite like saying, how do you think you're important enough to think about me when you're touching yourself? Quite like that.
But the music's sort of pretty dynamic and interesting.
Yeah, I'm loving this. Like, I wonder what the concept of who said, let's do this music video where you're gonna wear lobster claws and you're in a field, having a pillow fight and eating lobster.
Yeah, who knows where that idea came from. What do you think of that?
I like the song. I love the video. The video is so random.
Yeah, right?
It's amazing how you can just like create a random video about. It's just like they're just in a field.
Yeah, like the budget for that video must have been pretty low.
Yeah, yeah. That
Um,
was great. Have they got an album out?
They've got an EP out at the moment with 4 tracks, and they've just announced their debut album, which is also called Wet Leg, which is out in February of next year, I believe. And then I sort of decided to listen to them because they're supporting Idols in Mexico next year. Idols are playing in Mexico for the first time, and their support is Wet Leg. So I had a listen,
Lovely.
and they're really good. Idols have got loads of good Self-Esteem, who is on your homework for the next time we do a top 5, is supporting Idols on her tour. Yeah. And Witch Fever, a great band called Witch Fever. Like their Idols are really great at picking sport acts. They've got some brilliant. I've discovered some great music through the Idols sort of support. Anyway, let's get into the main chunk of what we're doing today, which is to talk about the 2021 Denis Villeneuve movie Dune Part 1, the adaptation of Frank Herbert's 1965 science fiction epic classic novel, also called Dune.
Before
Alex,
we do that,
yes.
I need to pee.
Okay, you go and pee. Too much spice? Yeah, too much spice. I don't think Alex can hear me now. Normally she can still hear me, but I think she can't hear me. She'll hear me when she edits this. Ha 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 ha. I'm Paolo Gucci. Parmesan cheese. Or she can hear me now and is just being quiet so that I can make a fool of myself. I guess we'll find out when she comes back. I was in your white dream, driving in your car, touching yourself.
Eyes back.
Cool. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So Alex.
Yes.
Prior to seeing Dune in the cinema, what was your experience of, knowledge of, interest in the science fiction property of Dune?
Okay, so I watched so it's one of my mother's favorite books.
Okay.
So I have known about Dune for a very long time because I remember this book in my mum's library that was basically like, you know, when somebody has read a book so much and it's just like everything is like,
oh yeah.
And so I knew that from her, and also, you know, let her talking about it, and then I watched David Lynch film, which was, you know, it was for like whenever I watched it, I must have been like the first time I watched it probably like 6 or 7. It was like an entertaining film. It was quite fun to watch. Nothing compared to this one, but I've always lived in a world where Dune existed somehow.
Interesting.
So, and then and that's my thing about Dune. Like I've always known, and my mum always said, "You need to read it. You need to read it." And her saying that the film was rubbish, and I was like, "Well, it's not that rubbish." And then going to see the film with my mother, this one, 2021 June, and my mother literally being in pieces.
Because she really likes Zendaya.
No.
She a big Zendaya fan.
Yeah, she's a big Zendaya fan.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I got that impression.
I've always lived with Dune. Without really knowing what it was about, which is interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
Hmm.
How about you?
Okay. I had no sort of Dune in the house when I was growing up. My parents haven't read Dune, so I didn't have any sort of knowledge of it when I was younger. I think my first knowledge of Dune as a thing came from when I first got into David Lynch and sort of deep dived into his career and was reading about all the films he's done. and then read about the fact that he'd done this Dune adaptation that famously everyone hated and didn't do very well, and he's not made a sort of a blockbuster studio film since, and certainly never will again. But it remains one of the only David Lynch movies that I've not seen. So I've not seen his Dune adaptation.
I think after watching the second part of Dune, Villeneuve's second part, you should watch that, because
I should watch the David
it
Lynch
is
one.
pretty iconic.
Yeah, that's fair. I should
Just
at some
because
point.
also in Italy it was really popular. In fact, it was produced by an Italian
Dino De
producer.
Laurentiis.
Yeah, and there was this advert for this specific channel that used one of the scenes from Dune. So I'll always remember this scene from David Lynch's Dune, because it was
really?
iconic that for years it was part of an ad. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
okay, that's interesting. Well, it's got a great cast. I mean, it's got Kyle MacLachlan's in it, Sting's in it, Patrick Stewart's in there, a few other David Lynch regulars like Jack Nance and Big Ed from Twin Peaks. So, no, I will watch it at some point. So then my next sort of knowledge, and then what I sort of picked up through osmosis, I suppose, about Dune was that it was about giant worms. That was kind of my one thing. I think that's the one thing a lot of people know is huge, massive worms in the desert. That's kind of like most people's awareness of Dune.
Is it Tremors? Or is it Dune? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. They're bigger in Dune. Or Beetlejuice.
Oh, Beetlejuice, yeah.
Beetlejuice has got sandworms in it. But yeah, sandworms was like my only thing I knew about it. Then a few years ago, they made a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune about the time that Chilean filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky attempted to make an adaptation of Dune prior to this was in like the late 60s, prior to even David Lynch taking it on. And the story of his failed adaptation of Dune is the best documentary about filmmaking that you could watch. It's incredible. Talks about their attempts to get Salvador Dali to play the Emperor, to get Orson Welles to play, I think it was potentially Baron Harkonnen Orson Welles was going to play. And so Salvador Dali would only do it if he meant he was the highest paid actor in Hollywood. He wanted some stupid $20 million to be in it, which in the 60s obviously wasn't going to happen. So then the producer came with this idea of being like, right, well, how many minutes of screen time is he going to have in the film? And Jodorowsky was like, I don't know, about 3 minutes. And he was like, right. And he went to Salvador Dali and said, I will pay you $1 million per minute of screen time. And Dali was like, incredible! I'll be the $1 million a minute actor. Incredible, great. I just loved that idea so much that he agreed to do the film. Orson Welles agreed to do the film when the director agreed to hire the chef of his favourite restaurant to come and cook him food every day, because Orson Welles was at the stage of his career where he just wanted to sit in a restaurant and eat food. And it's an incredible documentary. And so I saw that and then picked up a few more sort of context clues about what Dune was about. That there was a character called Paul who was quite important, and I still think it's quite funny that you've got all these the Shal Halud and House Atreides and House Harkonnen and all of these strange names, and then the main character is just called Paul. That really makes me laugh. So and then sort of that was about it until I heard that Denis Villeneuve was making an adaptation of Dune, and he's one of my favourite directors, as we discussed in the past. His Blade Runner sequel is amazing, and films like Arrival and Sicario I'm a really big fan of, and Prisoners. So I sort of was like, right, I want to kind of get into Dune before his adaptation comes out. So I read the book and stopped after a chapter because I can't read. I was unable to read it. It was too much to take in. In the age of COVID and the age of things, I found reading to be close to impossible for some reason. I still need to get back on that horse. And the first 50 pages of Dune are incomprehensible, and I just couldn't stick with it. So, and I feel guilty about that because I think I'd really like it and I want to read that book, but
in a way, the film is exactly like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit, I suppose.
The first half hour, you go, huh?
So I went into the film probably knowing maybe mildly more. No, I don't know. Maybe a similar amount to you. I knew what was going to happen in about the first half hour of the film, like the Bene Gesserit doing the put your hand in the box and stuff like that. Like those scenes I knew, and then once it gets to once they leave Caladan and go to Arrakis, that was the point where it was just unknown territory for me. Beyond the fact I was like, at some point, there's going to be a really big worm. That was all I knew. At some point, there's going to be a big worm. And that's kind of the promise of the movie for like 2.5 hours is like, don't you worry, there'll be a big worm at some point.
At some point, there'll be a worm.
And then finally, right at the end, it's like, check out this enormous worm. So that's the sort of setup of the film. This movie has got an amazing cast. Shall we just run down the cast a little bit before we get into it? So
please.
I've written the cast members down and broken it down by sort of house initially. So the movie follows primarily House Atreides is the sort of the main good guys in this film. And we follow, our main character is Paul Atreides.
Yeah.
Who is, George Lucas just wholesale tore chunks out of this book to make Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. He, what's the word? Like, some people steal and then geniuses copy. I don't know what the phrase is, but like it's fine that he did that because Star Wars is now its own beast. But like the setup of Star Wars has a lot of similarities with Dune, and Paul Atreides is very much our Luke Skywalker character, played by an actor who I feel like I should find irritating. But I am, as of yet, unable to find him irritating because he's kind of brilliant in everything he does.
He is brilliant. He's amazing.
Yeah. Despite his kind of floppy hair and yeah. Timothée Chalamet.
Oh, Timothée Chalamet.
The boy with the rhyming name. Yeah, he's great.
Like I thought, I that's the thing. You think you're gonna hate him, and then you watch him in. I think the first time I think it was in Lady Bird, and I thought, oh, it was really lovely. And then in Little Women, you go, why do I like you? And then Call Me by Your Name. I fell in love with him.
Yeah,
I don't want to like him.
And I found out recently that when he was about 14, he had a YouTube channel where he would modify Xbox controllers and sell them, which made me even more endearing to him. So yeah. Or endeared to him.
And also seems like a really nice person as well. When you see him in interviews, he's like so lovely.
Yeah. I mean, the guy, good old.
And then I watched him in The French Dispatch, and in The French Dispatch, I adore him.
Yeah, he's good in that movie.
I adore him. Never mind. Moving on.
Discuss that. We'll discuss The French Dispatch in more detail.
Yes.
In the new year, so please look out for that. So yeah, and Paul Atreides is sort of I don't know, a pretty great character. I kind of really like Paul in this film.
Yeah.
Like he is he finds out early on that he is the subject of a prophecy, and he kind of becomes more and more ethereal as the movie goes on. Mm-hmm. And from what I know, again through context clues of where his character ends up. As the story goes on, I'm interested to know how they will handle that on screen because it sounds bonkers. So I'm interested. But Timothée Chalamet started off well and is ably assisted by his on-screen mother, Lady Jessica Atreides, played by another just perfect actor, Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah.
I didn't realise how big a character Lady Jessica was. She's like the second lead in this film.
Yeah.
And she is great. She's so powerful and interesting and does, for a book written in 1965, for to have sort of a female character like this in it that is so just engaging and interesting is kind of brilliant. And Rebecca Ferguson is... Yeah. Rebecca Ferguson is like this...
And the evolution that she has... in the film, and how she's at the beginning, and now she's at the end.
Yeah,
it's just mind blowing. It's so beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, what's your Rebecca Ferguson sort of experience?
Well, I was looking at her filmography, and I
Because
don't think I've
my two favourite performances of her, I don't think you'll have seen.
I don't think I've seen anything with her. No, well, because there's Mission Impossible, but I haven't seen. Oh,
And
The
she's
Girl on the Train. I haven't watched The Girl on the Train because I read the book and
The
I
Girl
thought
on
it
the
was
Train is a bad movie, so that's fine.
stupid book. Sorry for
Yeah.
whoever's written it, but it's such a bad book.
Yeah, that's fine. No judgment there.
Sorry. I didn't. No, because I haven't seen Men in Black International. Like I haven't seen. This is the first time I've seen her. I think like that of something this of like that. But yeah.
So she is in the first, and also she's so much younger than. She doesn't look old, but she just is so talented and engaging that I just think of her as being someone that must have been around for a long time, but she really hasn't been, and she's still fairly young. She's
yeah,
incredible.
she's only a couple of years older than me.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing.
Yeah.
So Mission Impossible was the first sort of film that I remember seeing her pop up in, and she breathes a fresh energy and life into that franchise. She is great in the Mission Impossible films. And then again, a film that I adore is Mike Flanagan's. Side note, you have got to watch. It's a horror thing, but I think you'll like it. On Netflix, Midnight Mass.
Yeah.
It's so stunningly brilliant, and I think you would absolutely love it. And it's not very scary. It's just gothic and brilliant. Yeah. Midnight Mass is the absolute. I love it so much. Anyway, side note from that, Mike Flanagan, who made Midnight Mass, he made Doctor Sleep, the Shining sequel film, and Rebecca Ferguson plays what's her character? Rose the Hat, she's called in it. She plays the villain, and she is. It's one of the best villain performances in cinema. It's I think as time goes on and that movie kind of has more time to kind of sit in the consciousness of I don't know, the world. Her Rose the Hat villain will hopefully become more and more iconic because she's absolutely just eats the scenery in that film, and it's great. So yeah, Rebecca Ferguson is brilliant. Then we get the daddy of the family, the Duke Leto, played ably by, again, a perfect actor, Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
He's
Perfect.
brilliant. His beard in this movie is something to behold. I love him.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got a pretty similar beard to him right now.
Oh, good, thank you. I try my best. I don't think it's quite as well maintained.
I think the hair, you're doing the hair and the beard pretty good, eh?
Oh yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, I'll model myself after the Duke Leto. Yeah, he's sort of the leader of House Atreides. Very important character early on in the film, basically, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. But he's great, very, very, very keen on desert power, which made me chuckle a lot when they talk about desert power in this film.
I thought it was really sweet. It's like desert power.
But it's like we've ruled this planet with sea power and air power, but now we must learn desert power.
Desert power.
Like, what are you talking about? But it's great. And then we get into some sort of like the staff of House Atreides.
Yeah.
A good guy who, again, similar to Timothée Chalamet, an actor I feel like I should be irritated by, but just turns in such consistently wonderful performances that I find him brilliant. And you might think I'm talking about somebody else, actually, but I'm talking about Gurney Halleck, played by Josh Brolin.
I love Josh Brolin.
Yeah, I love Josh Brolin. I love him so much. I love him in this movie. He's great.
I love him in everything.
Yes.
I love Josh Brolin. He's just great.
He is just great, but I with him it's because he's in so much stuff. Like he's Thanos and he's Cable in Deadpool, and now he's Gurney Halleck in Dune. He's in so many movies that I feel like I should be at a point now I'm like, oh God, Josh Brolin again. But actually I'm just like, I'll watch the movie and I'm like, oh my God, Josh Brolin is so good. I love you, Josh Brolin. Hold me, Josh Brolin. So
hold me tight until I fall asleep.
Yeah. But like again, just great in this movie. Just sort of there's a very good bit early on where they're welcoming some people to the planet, and Oscar Isaac's Duke Leo's like, "Can you smile, please?" And Josh Brolin's just like, "I am smiling," and he's just got like a completely still face. And then the person I think you thought I was talking about is Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, who is
I love Jason Momoa. I didn't think like because when you see him, you know, I think you assume that he's not going to be a good actor.
Yeah,
but
because
he
he's
is
a sort of big. He's
Eh?
a big meathead. Basically, he looks like.
Yeah,
And started off life as Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones, which you haven't
Yeah.
seen, but like that is the ultimate big meathead role where you would watch that and be like, well, that guy is never going to turn up in anything else because he can only play this big
Yeah.
silent barbarian dude. No. Jason Momoa is
like
a revelation.
when
in
what
most things.
happens.
We'll talk about
I
it more
was
later.
literally, my mum was dying. She was like,
And as good as this
"Jason,
movie.
no!"
As good as this movie is, and I think you agree with me that this is a great movie. It's a very dry and serious movie, and pretty
Yeah.
much the only, and that's not really a bad thing. It works for the film because it's just made so well. But the only sort of lightheartedness, not even comic relief really, but as close as we get to anything that's sort of funny or comic relief is Duncan Idaho, Jason Momoa's character, who does sort of, when he turns up, he does kind of lighten the mood a bit, lighten the tone a bit.
Yeah.
He's very pally. And the movie needs that. I think it needs that presence, and he does it really well. He does it perfectly. So he's he's
And
great.
I just love the fact that Timothée Chalamet and Jason Momoa spend very little time together in this film, on the screen together, but their relationship is really felt.
Yeah, because the movie
Maybe
is so
because-
buttoned up.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't know if because Jason Momoa is so big and Timothée Chalamet is so small, or they just got each like in the couple of scenes they're together. It's just.
I think also there's
so
an element
good.
of like when like there's a scene right at the beginning where Paul's having breakfast with his mum and they're sat like 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
And then there's a scene where he's talking to he's talking to Oscar Isaac amongst what turns out to be like the graves of their ancestors, I think. Do you know when they're on that hillside? But I thought they were beehives. I thought they were stood amongst like a load of beehives.
The biggest
they were.
beehives.
I thought they were like a load of massive
How big are
beehives.
the bees?
Like huge. Well, it's an alien planet. They might have enormous bees that they ride. But again, there's a real distance between them when they're talking. But every time Paul and Duncan meet, there's a hug. They're close. There's a real physical closeness between the two characters that's not present amongst the family members, which I think is probably to a degree quite intentional. And yeah, like you said, really kind of makes their relationship very quickly you realise that they're very important to each other and that Paul really looks up to Duncan Idaho. Then a couple of smaller characters in House of Atreides. You got Thethir Hawat, who's a mentat played by Stephen McKinley Henderson. This is the guy who is a living computer, and they ask him questions, and his eyes roll up in the back of his head to give them the answer. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Can you tell me the name again?
He's called Thethir Hawat. He's a short guy, and he tries to resign at a point in the movie where somebody's been able to sneak in and attack them.
Yeah.
He's interesting only because it's an interesting idea for a character like pre-computers being popular. Frank Herbert came up with this idea of like living beings who had been trained to do calculations and have access to things in their minds that. So, like early on, he asks Oscar Isaac asks him how much it would have cost the Empire to bring a ship to their planet, and his eyes kind of roll back in his head, and he's able to give them the exact precise calculation, which is interesting. And then we come to Dr. Wellington Ua, played by Chang Chen, who is a bad guy, an upsetting character.
Half, like,
but the movie doesn't make this clear. But I read in the book that he's got that like diamond tattoo on his head. That's meant to signify that he's been like psychologically conditioned and trained to be incapable of doing harm. So he really like has to break his own training to do what he does in the film. He does.
Yeah, but for a reason that.
No, for a selfish reason.
But it wasn't. Yeah, but
for a very
I don't know,
selfish reason,
I felt really,
self-interest over the good
no,
of
but it
the
wasn't
entire
self-interest.
planet.
Oh, yeah, but I don't know. I felt really compelled with that character.
But he sacrifices
Yeah,
the
but
entire
then,
house that he works for.
but then he tries to redeem himself.
Yeah, but like it's too little, too late.
No,
We'll get to it more.
I
We'll
don't
get to it
know.
as we get there. We'll get to it when we get to it.
Okay.
Then the other most important house, who we don't see quite as much of, is the villainous House
Yeah.
Harkonnen, led by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, played by a mostly naked Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh, Skarsgård. If we don't go an episode without talking about Skarsgård.
I love a good Skarsgård. And this is the daddy. This is the daddy of the Skarsgårds.
This is the
big,
daddy.
Big Daddy Skarsgård.
Mm-hmm.
Who apparently wanted to have many more naked scenes in this movie than we have. He thought that the Baron was at his scariest when he's naked, and I think he's probably broadly correct.
Right.
An incredible villain. I hope we see more of him in the sequel because he's so just disgusting and weird and very much doing a Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now kind of thing, which I really enjoyed. There's a lot of scenes of him kind of wiping his face, like rubbing his hands down his face and being full of portent. And yeah, he's great. His nephew, Glosso Raban, is played by Dave Batista.
Dave Batista, he's back.
He's back. I mean, he has a small role in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner sequel, so I think they must enjoy working together because he has a bigger role in this, and I'm assuming he'll be bigger even than this in the sequel because he's only he's not in this film that much, but he makes a good impression. He's well cast as the nephew of the Baron.
Absolutely,
they definitely look like they'd be related.
Dave Batista. I feel like he probably brings a certain childish enthusiasm in. Not childish, but like he seems to be so enthusiastic of any film he's in.
Yeah.
And I just love that. He's just like great, isn't he? He's like, I'm in a film, and I love it, and I love him being in a film.
Yeah, I think he puts a lot of effort into being, because I think he knows that as a wrestler. As a professional wrestler, people would probably assume that he wouldn't be a very good actor.
Yeah.
And I think I remember reading that when he got the part in Guardians of the Galaxy, his first sort of big role, he went and got acting lessons and really committed to trying to be the best he could be. And I think it's paid off. I think he is...
Yeah. I think he's definitely the opposite of Jared Leto.
Yeah, or I was about to say Dwayne Johnson, who is a very, very popular guy, but I feel like when you watch a movie that Dwayne Johnson is in, you're only ever watching Dwayne Johnson, like you know that you're watching Dwayne Johnson, which I think is intentional. That's what he wants. He wants to be the star of the movie, whereas Dave Batista has a humility to him where he kind of wants to be in the movie as part of the movie and not as the main and like wants to just contribute to making great cinema, and he is absolutely fantastic. I adore him, and he's great in this movie. And then lastly, we've got the Harkonnens Mentat, Peter de Vries, played by David Dastmalchian. This is the guy who's sort of their servant who meets a sticky end, I think, when is poisoned eventually near the end of the movie. But he's played by an actor who pops up in loads of stuff, is in Blade Runner 2049, and played the polka dot man in this year's The Suicide Squad. But I don't think you've seen that. But he's a good guy. Like, have you seen The Dark Knight?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember? This is going back quite a while. But do you remember in The Dark Knight? There's a scene where Commissioner Gordon is in a public place and he gets shot at by an assassin. Yeah. Who then is kind of this giggling weird. He's this weird looking guy. That's this actor. That's one of the first.
Yeah, because he always plays like weird characters.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very good with that.
I just like it when I love spotting him in a movie. And for years it was quite difficult to spot him in films, but I think now that he's played the Polka Dot Man, and he's in the Ant-Man movies. He plays one of the friends in the Ant-Man films as well.
Yeah, he does.
He's a good character actor. I really enjoy him. Then we've got moving to the planet Arrakis. We've got the Fremen. Two important characters. The Fremen, Chani, played by Zendaya. Now, if you were a big Zendaya fan, Alex, how would you feel about this film?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Like really bad. It's Like, where is she?
It's largely as if Zendaya did a photo shoot for Vogue, and then they sort of just drop in bits of it throughout the film at random points. She's great. I mean, I personally I love Zendaya. She's sort of she's pretty incredible in it. Like, I've rewatched both Tom Holland Spider-Man movies recently, which I know you're not a huge fan of, but I think she is really just brilliant in those films, as like a very different vibed MJ than say we got from Kirsten Dunst. I think Zendaya is wonderful, but she's not in this film.
No, well, she's towards the end.
Well, I think she has like the first line in the movie and the last line in the movie are both spoken by Zendaya, but like that middle 2.5 hours, very little Zendaya.
There's no Zendaya, which is not a problem. But if you're a big Zendaya fan and you're watching this film because Zendaya's in it, you're going to be very disappointed. Yeah,
definitely. And Stilgar, my favourite name for a character in this movie is definitely Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem.
Until today, I didn't know that was Javier Bardem.
Yeah, I bet you didn't. It's not that easy to recognise him.
I was like, what? Is he in it?
Yeah. Not in similar to Zendaya, not in it a lot, but has a few more lines and has a very memorable scene where he spits on the floor, which is pretty good. So he's good. Then some other characters we've got Gaius Helen Mohiam, the Bene Gesserit woman played by Charlotte Rampling.
Yeah.
She's a pretty Charlotte Rampling is sorry?
She's terrifying.
She is terrifying. She's an iconic British actress, and she kind of plays the couple of scenes she has in this perfectly. And that's our main cast. Anyone else that you'd want to mention? But there's Dr. Lyot Kynes, the Judge of the Change, played by Sharon Duncan Brewster, the lady who is on Arrakis and shows them where the spice farms are, and is sort of an honorary member of the Fremen. Mm-hmm. She's pretty. I mean, she's kind of there just to move the plot around a bit, but she does a good enough job. I feel. Yeah. Anybody else?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, let's have a little breakdown of the plot of the movie.
Let's do it.
To help us do this, I've taken a plot summary from IMDb. So if we're crediting our sources, I'm not remembering the events of this movie off by heart. IMDb has helped with its plot synopsis. But this movie has now, a lot of Marvel movies have got post-credit sequences nowadays. In fact, most movies nowadays have post-credit sequences. I think this is the first time I've ever seen a pre-studio titled sequence. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because you watch a movie and the Warner Brothers logo or the Disney logo or whatever, that comes up. That's the first thing you see, right? In a film. This movie opens with a black screen and a terrifying voice says something, and it is subtitled, "Dreams are messages from the deep." And then the Warner Brothers logo comes up. So it has a pre-title sequence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What did you think of that? Because that made me jump a little bit, because I wasn't expecting... to suddenly hear this rumbling voice go.
And it was my first. Well, also it was my first time at the cinema after nearly 2 years, so it was pretty exciting. Yeah. And it was like, oh my god! It's like, I was like, ah.
So I kind of wanted to know, the IMDb synopsis I'm using didn't mention that bit, and I wanted to put it in. I wanted to remember what the quote was, so I looked it up and discovered who is saying that line, which gives me questions for the future. Who is
saying that line?
A sandworm. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what that means. But apparently that is a sandworm saying that at the start of the film.
Okay.
Who knows?
Great times.
Yeah. Then we have all the studio titles, and then we have this beautiful shot of a desert, and Zendaya's voice welcomes us to the movie, explaining that she lives on a planet called Arrakis, which is very important. She explains that she's a Fremen, one of the one of the sort of locals, and we sort of discover that this planet has a substance known as spice, which in the books is called the spice melange, but in the film is never. I don't think the word melange is ever mentioned. It's just referred to as spice.
Yeah.
Which is this this substance that can give people sort of hallucinations and is an interesting substance to have as a person, but then also makes interstellar travel possible, like through space. So has become the most valuable substance in the galaxy, making Arrakis the most important planet in the galaxy, at least in terms of like in terms of money and value in that way.
A lot of like a kind of a very colonialist vibe it gives.
Absolutely, definitely, because the Fremen just want to use their spice as like a sort of drug, but the Empire has come in and started mining it and fighting with the Fremen, and the Empire's mining operation is being run by, at the start of the movie, House Harkonnen. Led by Baron Harkonnen, etc. But she explains that the Emperor has decided to remove the Harkonnens from Arrakis and replace them with the Atreides family, a very different family who will have a very different method of ruling the planet. And that's kind of the setup. We discover later on that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. The Emperor might have had ulterior motives for removing the Harkonnens, and the Harkonnens are not willing to leave without a fight. But that all comes later. For now, we get transported to the planet Caladan, where we spend a little bit of time with our hero family, the Atreides. We start with breakfast with Paul and Lady Jessica, where we are introduced to what George Lucas decided to turn into the Force. But in this movie is called The Voice.
The Voice, yeah. The
Voice. I mean, the spice is the Force, I guess. But like, there's a lot of things in this movie that have parallels in Star Wars. So like the very famous scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "These are not the droids you're looking for," and they go, "No, these are not the droids we're looking for." Yeah. That is just exactly the voice from Dune, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the voice from Dune is more terrifying.
Well, yeah, the way Denis Villeneuve, and again, this is what sets this movie apart and makes this movie work, is that Denis Villeneuve has ways of portraying these things that make them feel, because now, to a modern day audience, that will feel like a rip-off of Star Wars, even though if you know the history of it, it's the other way around. But Denis Villeneuve is able to present these ideas in such an original way that you wouldn't necessarily immediately, because it is terrifying. So Lady Jessica's trying to train her. We learn pretty soon that Lady Jessica was told to have a daughter by the Bene Gesserit, who are this race of women, sort of nuns, I guess. They seem like nuns, but they also have a very powerful force. They are a powerful force in the galaxy. They are advisors to the Emperor, etc.
Yeah,
and they talk about how they work in years. They have plans that last years, and one of their plans is that they're going to have the this sort of Messiah figure is going to appear one day. And Lady Jessica very arrogantly has thought that her child could be the Messiah. So instead of having a daughter, as she was told to have, she's had a son. Obviously, on our planet, that choice is not as easy to make as it appears to be in the world of Dune. Although actually, like, Dune is, unlike Star Wars, Dune is supposed to be set in our galaxy. Like, Earth exists in the world of Dune. It's just set far, 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 far in the future, which I think is cool. I like that idea. So, so like I said, Lady Jessica thinks that has had this son, has had Paul, and believes that he is capable of being the Messiah, being the chosen one, and therefore is trying to train him in the ways of being a sort of superhero, I guess, and is trying to make him use the voice. So he tries to force her to pass him some water using his voice, which he sort of doesn't quite successfully do, but we do get to hear a little bit of what the voice sounds like, which is terrifying.
It's just like, it actually like made my soul like something vibrate in me. Like, I don't know how they did that. It was just like,
and then we have another touch early on again by Denis Villeneuve, that I think is genius, is where you have a couple of sequences in the movie, and one happens quite early on, where Paul is learning about the world of Arrakis through this sort of audiobook encyclopedia thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's doing this voice, but I could sit and listen to this guy describe alien planets to me for the rest of my life and be perfectly happy.
Should be a request. Please, can somebody do an audiobook?
He needs to do the audiobook. But that's where we learn some of the things we've just been discussing about how important the spice is and that it can be used to travel through time, etc., etc. And then we cut to Duke Leto. We meet Duke Leto, Gurney Halleck, and their mentor, Mentat Thuthe Hawat, are awaiting a reception from the Empire, who have come to announce that House Atreides are going to be put in charge of Arrakis and are going to move themselves to Arrakis and leave Caladan in order to control the spice. And we sort of learn in the next couple of scenes that the Duke Leto understands that this is a very dangerous assignment and that potentially the Emperor is afraid of how popular House Atreides is afraid of House Atreides making a play to rule the galaxy, and is therefore sort of instigating a civil war between the Harkonnens and the Atreides, hoping to weaken one or both houses, I'm assuming, in order to allow the Emperor to remain the strongest force in the galaxy. I'm assuming that's what I'm picking up. Is that right?
Like I said, the first half hour, I was like in awe of this film because it looks beautiful. It's acted magnificently.
The ship, the Empire's ship, this big round ship. The sense of scale that he achieves as the ship comes down and the big ramp lowers is something else. Like,
he's an incredible filmmaker, but I did not get any of that.
Okay, well, that's my understanding is that...
Yeah, that's fine. The thing is, this is a 2 hour and 35-minute film.
Yeah.
And it flew by. It was beautiful to watch. I didn't understand much of it. Like, I understood some things and, I already I knew some things from some other things. But if you put me in a room and watch that, like, with no knowledge, prior knowledge, I probably would have not understood.
Unlike you, I've seen it twice, which I think is also a reason why I'm able to. Because I think on the first watch, I was largely like you, where I was like, "This is beautiful." There's a great scene in an early Simpsons episode where Homer watches Twin Peaks and he's just watching a man dance with a horse, and then it just cuts to Homer going, "Ha ha, incredible." I've got no idea what's going on, and I feel like that's largely how you could react to Dune. It's just like, this is amazing. So I don't know what it is. I think
something was happening, but I wasn't really sure. Like, I knew they were moving in the new, they were moving and becoming the new things of spice, but
yeah.
It doesn't, and also it didn't really matter at that point.
No, it doesn't matter too much. No. Then we cut to Duncan, Idaho. Duncan, Idaho has been on Arrakis for a few weeks, learning about the Fremen, learning about the world of Arrakis. Because there's a very odd thing in this movie where it feels like people don't know about things. People don't know about things at the start of this film. Like, it's like the Atreides are going, like, even though Arrakis is set up to be the most important planet in the galaxy, etc., etc., nobody actually understands it. Like, nobody knows how many Fremen there are on the planet. There's a conversation later where they realise that there are hundreds of thousands of Fremen living on Arrakis, but the Harkonnens thought there was about 12. Like, the Harkonnens thought it's like 6 people or something. Yeah. So it's an odd thing where, like, not everything is known to everyone, which is interesting. So Duncan Idaho's been there scoping it out, and we have this first scene of Paul and him clearly having a strong bond, and he's going to go back to Arrakis quite soon, and Paul asks if he can go with him, and Duncan Idaho's just like, I'd love it, but no, you can't. You're the son of the king, effectively, so no, you need to do what you're told. And Paul tries to tell, because part of the idea of Paul being this messianic figure is that he is having visions, he's having dreams, and he's having dreams of Zendaya's Chani, but he's also had dreams of Duncan Idaho falling in battle and dying. He tries to warn Duncan Idaho of this, and Jason Momoa is very much like, you can have dreams about anything. I don't care about that, because it's just a dream, isn't it, mate?
Yeah.
and sort of ignores him. He says everything important happens when we're awake, and but certainly foreshadowing something that will happen later in the movie, sadly. And then we cut to Paul and the Duke amongst their massive beehive collection, discussing the importance of Arrakis. And Duke Leto gives us the wonderful line: "We've ruled Caladan with sea power and air power, but now we must learn how to use desert power," which
desert power
made me and my friend really, really giggle in the cinema because we're children. Just the phrase "desert power" really makes me laugh. But I guess there is a sort of a desert power. We see at the end of the movie how powerful the desert can be. So sure. So yeah, they need to do that effectively. I think the Duke is planning to go to Arrakis, continue to mine the spice for the Empire, but also form an alliance with the Fremen, the native people of Arrakis, to potentially upstage the Emperor later. But, you know, nothing quite goes to plan in the second half of this film, so we'll see how that all plays out in the second part. But the Duke Leto will not be getting his opportunity to do that, sadly. So they have that conversation. We have a session. We meet Gurney Halleck properly, where him and Paul Atreides have a sparring match, and we see for the first time how this movie is interpreting the very complex combat system used in the world of Dune, where people have these personal shields that will stop anything that's moving quickly, but can't stop something moving slowly. So I think the way to be a good so you can't really shoot each other because the bullets will be stopped. So there's a lot of fighting with swords, and there's a lot of moving very quickly, but then slowing down just at the last moment to try and get through the shield. And they've done it. I've seen clips of the David Lynch movie where he kind of tried to do this using almost like rotoscoped animation, and it looks bizarre, like these big rectangle blocks drawn over the characters. Obviously, with the advent of today's special effects, they much more successfully show it with sort of these red and blue filters. And I think is it blue if the shield's working and red once the shield's broken?
Yeah, which is fantastic because you know red, it's the color of kind of blood and
it's a very quick,
it's really
useful.
Clever.
Yeah, it is extremely useful. So they have that sparring session, and they sort of discuss how dangerous it's going to be on Arrakis and that he needs to be prepared, etc., etc. He has some dreams about Chani. And then we meet the Bene Gesserit. Then Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam arrives on Caladan to test Paul.
Yes.
She's arrived to test Paul. The Bene Gesserit know, because Lady Jessica, as well as being the wife of Duke Leto, is a member of the Bene Gesserit, so is sort of has almost dual roles in this world of one being the wife of the leader of this family, but also being a member of this race of sort of interstellar nuns.
But they're not married, are they?
Are they not married?
This, I'll have to check. But
because
there was something at one point. It's like, I'm going to marry you. Did he not say something like that?
I thought he said, "Well, I have married." I'm not sure, but she's Lady Jessica, and he's the Duke Leto.
Okay.
She's very important either way, but she is.
Yeah, she's extremely important.
Yeah. So this is also where we meet Dr. Ua, who sort of tries to warn Paul about the Bene Gesserit.
They're not married. She's the concubine of Duke Leto rather than his wife. Because at one point, he says, "I want to marry you," or something.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. Interesting.
Yeah.
But she's certainly the partner of the Duke Leto.
Yeah. She's the concubine.
The concubine. But is equally a member of the Bene Gesserit. Dr. Ua warns Paul about how dangerous the Bene Gesserit are, and then we have this scene, this sort of terrifying horror movie scene. Which is all comes down to Timothée Chalamet's acting. Like he has to put his hand into a box and then display on his face that he's feeling the worst pain a human being can feel.
Yeah.
And again, another great sort of Dune word here. The Bene Gesserit mother puts Paul through the test of the Gom Jabbar. She says, you've got to your neck. She holds this needle to his neck and is like, this is the Gom Jabbar, and if I stab you with this, you'll die instantly. You need to put your hand in this box, basically, and keep your hand in the box, and if you take your hand out of the box, I'll kill you. And you definitely can tell that she means it. Like, there is definitely the possibility that Paul is not walking out of this room alive.
She's dangerous. She's extremely
she is very dangerous. Yeah, and doesn't seem very trustworthy. Definitely is holding a lot of cards close to her chest. But Paul kind of passes this test. He puts his hand in the box. He managed to put up with the pain, and they have this. Then Paul leaves, and the Lady Jessica and Mahim have this discussion about the fact that Lady Jessica was supposed to have a son. And she produced she was supposed to have daughters, but she produced a son instead, and accuses Lady Jessica of being arrogant enough to think that her son might be the Kwisatz Haderach, which is the name that I was forgetting earlier of the Messiah or the Chosen One that they are expecting. So Lady Jessica says, yeah, I think he is the Kwisatz Haderach, and that she's warned by the mother that Paul's abilities are not developed and that he could die on Arrakis because it's going to be pretty dangerous there.
This scene shows how Timothée Chalamet is such an incredible actor.
Yeah.
His range is amazing. You think there's something in that box.
Yeah, definitely.
He definitely feels pain.
It's a tough one to play. I'd be interested to see the David Lynch adaptation of this scene, and see how Kyle MacLachlan played it.
It's not. It's not the same. But
no, I bet it's not the same.
Yeah.
Paul overhears Lady Jessica and the Bene Gesserit having this discussion, so now he is aware of the fact that there is this prophecy surrounding him that he may be the Kwisatz Haderach. And we'll see how that goes as we move on. Then we make the trip to Arrakis. There's these incredible shots of this enormous space thing that all the ships kind of use to travel through space. And again, the sense of scale that they achieve is genuinely astonishing. I saw this on a super screen cinema thing here on a massive screen, and it was just it was amazing. Really, really good. And they get to the planet Arrakis, which is where we're going to spend the rest of the movie. It looks absolutely gorgeous. The city that they arrive at as we go over the top of it just looks incredible. We are now in the world of tans and browns and that sort of colour scheme. We're going to stay firmly in that for the rest of the film. And you've got this scene where they're disembarking their ships and they're walking kind of along through effectively the airport runway, and all of these local, I guess, are they Fremen? Would these people be Fremen, or would these people? I think so. Yeah. So I guess local sort of Fremen are watching them arrive, and they are sort of on their knees. They're gesticulating. They're saying a phrase over and over again, and basically they believe that Paul is this Messiah. They think that a chosen one has arrived on the planet, and again he's kind of confronted with this view of himself that other people have got. Although Paul sort of dismisses it as superstition by the Bene Gesserit. I think he's struggling to believe that he could possibly be this sort of important figure. And then we have a few scenes of them sort of settling into the planet, including a pretty good scene of Lady Jessica interviewing people to be her housekeeper. Do you remember this scene?
Yeah.
What do you think of this moment? This is this really was amazing. I thought this bit where she
well, you can sense, because I think you can see when she has to give Paul to the Mother Superior, you kind of assume she's a weak character that has no free will, and maybe that she's not very powerful. Yeah. But even when they are having breakfast, she seems quite weak because she's like a servant. But I think this is the first moment that you realize that she's not week.
No.
And she knows everything that's going on, and
Yep.
she's one step ahead
Yeah.
of
She has
everyone.
this great, complicated series of hand signals that she uses to communicate
Yeah.
with people, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
Because she realizes that one of these women she's sort of interviewing. They're all stood in a row, in a line, and she's walking along the line. She realizes one of them is. I think there is a difference between just people who are living in the city that they're on, and then the Fremen. I think that there is a difference between those two camps, if that makes sense. Because I think she realizes that one of these women is a Fremen.
Yeah. Maybe.
And she sort of signals to her guard, with these hand signals, like, please be prepared for violence.
Yeah.
And but she doesn't visibly appear scared, and like you say, you kind of see the strength in her. And she basically, this woman gets this knife out that is later explained is made from the tooth of a sandworm, or a shai halud, as the Fremen call the sandworms, and is a very important. It's very. I imagine it's not easy to get the tooth of a sandworm, so it's quite an important thing. And also, based on the size of the sandworms, I mean, it must be like literally a splinter from the tooth of a sandworm. Cause...
I know, it's really small.
Yeah. But there's this great bit where the Fremen woman, almost becomes overcome by she's very religious, clearly, and she's part of her belief is that this Messiah, this chosen person, is going to arrive on the planet. And when she realizes that she is living in the age of this being a true thing and it's happening, she sort of has this moment where she kind of screams. She kind of goes, "Ah!" And the actress plays it incredibly. Like, it really sent shivers down my spine. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie. And she says, she basically says, when you see prophecy coming true before your eyes, you can't really handle it, which I think is amazing. So yeah, we see that, and then we have a scene of Paul again listening to his incredible audiobook that I need a copy of, which is explaining that there are tiny little mice that live on Arrakis that, basically this thing about there being tiny mice. But he notices a tiny, tiny little, what they call hunter-seeker drone, burns its way into his room. And there's this incredibly tense scene. I mean, I imagine you were quite scared of this bit.
Yeah.
And it's sort of floating around the room, and again, Denis Villeneuve manages to make it just seem very otherworldly and terrifying the way it moves, and it gets right up to Paul, and there's this standoff between the two of them, and the shout out Mapes, who's the same lady we just saw being interviewed by Lady Jessica, enters the room, distracts the drone just long enough for Paul to move to the side and sort of destroy it. And we find out that when the Harkonnens left, they left a guy sealed up in the wall to control this drone to attack Paul when he arrived. And we see this sort of terrifying guy with like a mask over his face, who they found inside the walls. And their mentat tries to resign for allowing this to happen, and the Duke's like, no, people are attacking me. I need your help. You can't go. You need to stay, basically. And then we see these scenes of the Duke Leto surveying his new domain and sort of working out that the Harkonnens have done everything they can to sabotage the mining operation. And
I think that moment is quite crucial too, because if you haven't understood anything until now, that moment where he nearly gets killed, Paul nearly gets killed. That's the moment that that they're going to be in danger. There's definitely something that is going to put them in danger. So if you've been a bit like, huh, that the previous people haven't really left voluntarily. And I think that's a good point to kind of like a good moment to kind of realize that, okay, so now things are making more sense. Because I think what I love about this film is like although it doesn't make sense, certain things happen, and then what has been happening for the past few hours makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. That's true, actually. Yeah, because it is no, it does make the audience aware that the Harkonnens are a threat and are going to continue to be a possible threat. So the Duke decides he wants to take this issue to the Imperial Arbiter of the Transition, Dr. Lyot Kynes, who we will meet a little bit later in the movie, but they kind of set up the fact that she's going to arrive, and she's kind of one of the Fremen, but isn't quite one of the Fremen, etc. And then Duncan Idaho comes back. We get to say hello to Jason Momoa again, which we're very happy with. He's been living with the Fremen for a few weeks, and there's just this great scene of where it's just like it's like when a friend comes back from holiday and you're like, what was it like? And he's like, oh, it was incredible. Like, the people are so lovely. And, and he's just like telling them about this great trip he's had. And confirms their belief or their suspicion that there are many, many more Fremen living on Arrakis than the Harkonnens were aware of, hundreds of thousands even. And they live in these kind of caverns beneath the desert, and they're incredible fighters. He's never known fighters like it, etc. And that one of their leaders, Stilgar, has come to meet with them. So we meet Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem, close to unrecognisable, because he's one of the most... If you look at Javier Bardem in, say, Skyfall, and then in this movie, it does... Oh. He's one of the most changeable actors. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And basically, there's a slightly tense standoff between Duke Leto and Stilgar. Duke Leto is the Empire's sort of chosen ruler of Arrakis, and then the Fremen as being, the natives who don't really want to be sort of ruled by the Empire. And Stilgar spits on the floor to start with, and Josh Brolin is immediately like, you're gonna die now for doing that. Yeah. And Duncan Idaho has to be like, no, and he spits on the floor as well, and is basically and again, this is setting up the idea that, when you're out in that desert, all moisture is valuable and sacred. Yeah. And Stilgar is actually showing them a great sign of respect by sharing his body moisture with them. So they all then spit on the floor, and Josh Brolin looks disgusted. And then Stilgar says, please don't travel beyond the city, only to mine spice. And Duke Leto, Oscar Isaac, is basically like, nah, son, this is my planet now. I'll do what I want, but I will respect you, and hopefully we can work together, kind of thing. But he's also like not willing to back down, still wants to show that he is in a position of power. So it's kind of an interesting mutual admiration between the two men, but you can tell there's a tenseness as well, which is a good, like, nice, complex, interesting character beat. Between, I like that. Then there's a bit where Paul asks Stilgar to say, but he leaves, but he looks at Paul and says something like, I know you. I know you. Like, there's this odd moment between them where he sees Paul and is sort of like, okay, you're here. That's interesting. What did you think of that sort of moment?
It becomes more real, the importance of Paul in the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, it continues to set up.
Because before, you have it's the build up of like Paul becoming the more and more
the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we have another moment very soon after that again helps to paint this up, where we meet Lyot Kynes, and they're gonna head off to investigate the spice mining operation to see what sort of state it's in, and they have to wear still suits, which are extremely important in they are not quite this, but they're sort of like what lightsabers are to Star Wars is what they are to Dune. They're like one of the sort of key bits of technology that's been invented by Frank Herbert for this world, and it's the idea that when you're out in the desert, there's no moisture. Any moisture that's in your body needs to remain in your body, so they wear these still suits that sort of recirculate any sweat, any moisture that comes out of them is recirculated, and they drink it back up, and it's all sort of they have these pipes that go into their noses, and the designs of these suits I think are pretty great. I like how these look.
Yeah, definitely.
They do a good job. And then there's this quite almost funny scene where she inspects them to make sure they've put the still suits on properly, and she basically sees that Paul has like tied his shoelaces properly. It is like, oh, you're the Messiah because you know how to tie your shoes.
Yeah.
She's like, who taught you to tie your shoes like that? And he's like, it just seemed like the right way to do it. And she's like, Ah, okay.
Oh,
Well, I get the. This is
okay.
okay. That you're the chosen one. She actually says, and it's a pretty good line. She says, "He shall know your ways as if born to them," which is
Yeah.
a great line. But it's quite funny that it's coming after she's just seen him tie his shoelaces, effectively. But yeah. Then they fly out, and again, another great bit of design work from Dune, from Denis Villeneuve and his team. They fly out in these. I can't remember quite what they're called. And it doesn't say here on my list, but ornithopter. They're called ornithopters. These sort of dragonfly-shaped helicopter things that they fly out in, but they look like dragonflies, and they have these big wings that flap at the sides. They fly out in these to observe some spice mining, where they it's basically this huge, big rectangular vehicle that's like thumping the ground and kicking up spice, and then he's like mining the spice basically and taking the spice in, and they see quite quickly that this operation has attracted a sandworm. Yeah, and we can see in the far distance the sand's being kicked up as this worm races to sort of find out what's causing all this commotion on the surface of the planet. And they clearly are used to this happening. They know what to do. They call in a carrier that's going to basically come in and lift up the sandcrawler. And again, just by the way, like that's a Star Wars thing again. Something else that like Sandcrawler is the name of a vehicle in Star Wars. So well done, George.
George Lucas. Well, it was written, this book was written in what, 1975, 1965?
1965, so yeah.
Yeah, 1965. Yeah. So, George Lucas was like, this is
Sandcrawler, that sounds like a great idea. But the idea is this thing is going to come and lift up the Sandcrawler, and once it's not on the surface of the desert anymore, the worm won't be able to hear it, sense where it is, and will get bored and leave, and they'll be able to carry on their mining operation. Unfortunately, and again, because the Harkonnens have sabotaged the vehicles and sabotaged everything, this carrier comes to lift up the Sandcrawler, and one of its grabby claw things that it's using to grab onto the ship breaks. It can't lift up the crawler. Oh no, everyone in it needs to be rescued. Yeah. So they land their ornithopters. They go off to they run off to get all the people off this thing before the sandworms arrives. It's a very tense moment. It's a good action sort of set piece in the film.
Tense. Because also it shows how Duke Leto is a benevolent man. He's
he's a good guy.
He's not like the people before. He's willing to help people and to be open to like new things. And I think because not everybody was going to fit in the helicopter.
Yeah. But he's like, well, do you know what? We're going to find a way to make him fit in the helicopter because
so
we're not leaving anyone here to die.
And his son's life to save other people. So you see that, they're good people. Yeah.
Paul gets out to try and help and is hit with a mammoth-sized dose of spice, which causes him to have an absolute freak out. And hallucinate. Sees a bunch more sort of visions of himself with Zendaya. Sort of wandering around and not really doing much, but he sees this vision of himself with Chani, and sort of ends up like kneeling down on the sand, out of his mind. And luckily, Gurney Halleck manages to get over to him and grab him and drag him back onto the ornithopter, and they get up to safety, and then we get our first look at a sandworm in this film. And because they've kind of built a good sense of scale of showing how small Paul is in comparison to this sandcrawler, and then we get to see how tiny the sandcrawler is in comparison to the size of this sandworm, which is absolutely just Godzilla-sized. Huge thing. It just comes up under the ground and just swallows whole this sandcrawler into its enormous toothed mouth, which looks quite similar to a sarlacc from Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it's very, very, very similar, isn't it?
Yeah, exceptionally similar. But Paul's fine. The doctor examines him and says, hey, that spice is serious business, but you're going to be all right. Don't worry about it. Then everything goes to shit. Then everything falls apart.
Where does it go?
It goes to absolute. It just falls into the toilet at this point. The whole everything starts to go wrong now. The Harkonnens play their hand. Yeah, oh, it's tense.
It's just so much tension. So much tension.
Yeah. The Duke. So later that night, or later one night, the Duke awakens. He senses that something's not quite right. He tries to call security. He doesn't get an answer. So he leaves. He's sort of creeping around at night time to try and find out what's going on. He finds the Mapes, the housewoman, the Fremen housewoman that they've hired. He's stabbed, is dead.
Yeah.
And he gets shot at this moment with a paralyzing arrow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my god! When that happens, I was like, "No, not yet, not yet."
And we discover that the traitor is Dr. Ua, who, correct me if I'm wrong, has done this. We find out a little bit later, just to save his family, right?
Yeah, but he saved his family, his wife, from like a horrible, situation.
Yeah. He could, of course, have gone to the Duke and told the Duke that he was being blackmailed in this way. He could have done any number of things that didn't involve sacrificing the entirety of House Atreides, as far as he's aware. Considering that, he's the Doctor and is supposed to have been trained to do no harm. Pretty poor move on his part, Dr. Ua.
I guess, but what could have the Duke done?
I don't know, but like, if his wife is going to get murdered by the Harkonnens, his wife's going to, like, he shouldn't, break his Hippocratic oath effectively in this way. I have big judgment time for the Doctor here. I think he's made the wrong choice.
Of course, he's made the wrong choice. It's not like he's definitely made the wrong choice. However, like, when you're in such a desperate position and somebody has given your wife a way out, and that's the only way out, I don't know. I feel that you would do anything, in a way, to save your partner.
Yeah, but
and talking to the Duke would have changed absolutely nothing.
But it would have given the Duke knowledge of the trap, and maybe they'd have been able to survive.
If the trap hadn't gone through, then his wife wouldn't have been saved.
Yeah, but his wife is just one person. The choice he's making is between his wife and like hundreds and hundreds of other people. It's a very selfish choice to say, I'm going to save the one person that's important to me, and knowingly sacrifice hundreds of people just because they aren't my wife.
Yeah. I just felt sorry for him, because I would never want to make that choice. Nobody wants to make that choice. Yeah. So I felt really sorry for him, because he had to betray people that he actually trusts, like people that he actually, like, I feel like he had a really good relationship with Paul and with Duke Leto. So I thought it must have been a really, really tough choice for him, and I felt really bad for him.
But he's lowered the shields, he's cut off communication, he's opened them up to get attacked, and his one attempt at a saving grace is to install this poisonous gas capsule in Duke Leto's tooth, and he says, if you crush this at the right moment, you may actually be able to take out the Baron. So he is trying to help him.
He's also trying to save, he's trying two things, isn't he?
Yeah, but he knows that, like, if you set off a big poison bomb in your mouth, you're the first person that's going to die. So he's accepting the death of the Duke Leto here to try and take out the Baron. Gurney Halleck wakes up. He is, if we haven't mentioned already, he's kind of the security head of House Atreides. So he wakes up to this assault happening, and there's this great scene where he kind of rallies the troops, and they run out, and everything's exploding around them, and they...
Oh my goodness, that was crazy.
Yeah, and that is the last we see of Gurney Halleck in the film, is running off into this battle. We do not see that character die, so...
No.
I'm assuming there's more to come from Gurney Halleck, which I'm pretty all right with. He's a great... Josh Brolin can do no wrong.
But that was a crazy moment, because nobody was scared. Everybody just went for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they were like, "Go, Atreides!" They're yelling the name of the house.
Yeah, but the people that were going against them, they were like mercenaries.
It's these
pretty scary people.
Sardukar troops, who aren't mercenaries. They're actually the Empire's own. They're the Emperor's troops. So, by their involvement, sort of signals to Atreides that, the Emperor has very much sided with the Harkonnens.
Yeah.
none of us are going to
Yeah.
survive this. We're going to die because it can't get out that this has happened effectively. And the
Yeah.
Sarduka troops are led by this terrifying actor who's popped up in loads of stuff. And they speak in this kind of guttural,
Yeah.
almost sounds like Mongolian throat singing.
Yeah.
It's terrifying the way these characters talk. It's very like... It's my throat hurts just doing it for that second, so well done to them. But yeah, they've like, because I think Gurney Halleck, the Atreides troops, would easily not even outnumber, but outmatch the Harkonnens warriors. But with the Sarduka troops as well, it's pretty much spells doom for the Atreides, which is sad. But there we go. Duncan has a great scene where he fights a bunch of these Sarduka troops and tries to save Paul and Lady Jessica, but they've already been taken. There's a scene. What we haven't really mentioned is throughout the movie, there's a handful of scenes where it cuts to the homeworld of Baron Harkonnen, and we see a handful of scenes with the Baron and his nephew. They're discussing the fact that their plans. They meet with the Bene Gesserit woman that met with Lady Jessica, who asks them not to. There's a great scene where the Baron's got this weird Spider-Man pet thing that's crawling around, and when the Bene Gesserit woman, Mother Superior, turns up to meet with the Baron, she's like, "Go to that," and he's like, "It doesn't understand English, don't worry about it." And she says to it in the voice, "Leave," and it leaves, and she's like, "Well, it does. Look at that. It understands something." And
she goes,
yeah, exactly. And she basically says, "Go and kill the Duke Leto and House Atreides, etc., but leave Paul and Lady Jessica. They're important to us, so you need to leave them alive," basically. And the Baron says, "Oh yes, of course I'll leave them alive." And then as soon as she leaves, he's like, "Yeah, we'll leave them alive, but dump them in the middle of the desert." So that happens. They get taken by these three Harkonnen soldiers into an ornithopter to be dumped in the desert. They know that Lady Jessica is able to, as a Bene Gesserit, is able to use the voice to control them. So they have covered up her mouth. Paul, I think they assume, can't use the voice because I think in the world of Dune, it would be expected that only women or only members of the Bene Gesserit could use it. So they've not covered up his voice. So she encourages him, and again, using her brilliant little hand signals. She signals to Paul to use the voice, and he's just able to use it to get one of the men to remove his mother's gag, and then Lady Jessica is unleashed, and we really see just how powerful this woman is, as she immediately just creates absolute mayhem in this little.
It was so good.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant.
Moment, I was like, yes.
She's just like, "Kill yourself, you kill yourself, you kill him, let us out," etc. And they all just do it. And, there's one of them it's an interesting wrinkle. One of them's deaf, so can't hear the voice.
Yeah.
So she has to be like, she tells one of the others to kill him, basically. But it's pretty exciting stuff. The ornithopter crashes. They come out of the wreckage and they see the city of Arrakis burning in the distance, and they realise they're going to have to survive in the desert. And there's a bit that I missed on the first watch where, as well as providing the Duke Leto with the poisonous gas capsule in his tooth, the Doctor has also hidden supplies in the ornithopter for Lady Jessica and Paul, and we know that because where the supplies are, a diamond has been etched onto the side of the ornithopter.
Yeah. I didn't realise that.
I didn't realise it until the second watch. And that diamond, he mentions, I think, to look for that diamond to them or something. And they find where that diamond has been etched on the ornithopter. They find some supplies for them. So he has done a couple of things to try and help them because he's obviously very conflicted about his decision, but it was the wrong decision. Then we see the Baron. Have you seen The Lord of the Rings Return of the King?
Yeah.
The third Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah.
Do you remember, there's a scene in that film that me and my brother and my housemate as well really enjoy, where the Steward of Gondor is up in his castle, the big white city of men, And the guy is Sean Bean's character's dad is in charge of it and doesn't want to allow Viggo Mortensen to come back and be the king. He's sort of looking after it until the king returns. And there's a scene where he's eating dinner, and he makes Merry or Pippin, I can't remember which one, sing a song for him. And as he's having this song sung for him, he's eating like tomatoes, and all the juice from the tomatoes is rolling, and he's eating a chicken leg and just sort of like... Blah, 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 blah. This scene here where the Baron is eating food in Duke Leto's sort of chambers really reminds me of that bit in Lord of the Rings where he's just sort of like smushing this stuff into his face and just being a really gross, great big fat guy who's just enjoying this meal. So I liked this bit. And then there's this idea in the books that's brought into the film where the Baron is so overweight and so huge and so lazy that he doesn't use his legs. He doesn't walk. He has these... anti-gravity sort of things mounted around his body, and he just sort of floats around. So there's a very sinister scene where the Duke Leto is paralysed on one end of this long table, and the Baron's at the other end having his dinner. And they bring in the doctor, and the doctor's like, I did what you asked me to do, you know, you said that you'd reunite me with my family. And the Baron sort of floats across to him.
Ugh,
and it's like, I did.
And it's so long, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all long and... And he's like, yeah, we'll be with your family then. And he snaps this guy's neck and kills him, which is horrible. And then he gets right up in the grill of Oscar Isaac being like, look at me, I've defeated you, haven't I, you stupid little guy. And Oscar Isaac chooses the perfect moment to explode the gas capsule in his mouth. And this poison gas immediately fills the room, killing basically everyone except for the Baron, who is...
Rhino man.
Yeah, giant big rhino man, and isn't killed by it, but is severely injured. And there is one of my favourite moments in the movie is once the gas is dispersed, they open this room to take the bodies out, and they go into the room and they look up at the ceiling, and because he has the anti-gravity sort of thrusters on him, the Baron is just sort of up in the corner of the room, sort of spinning around in a sort of fetal position, nearly dead from this poison, and it's just this crazy visual image of this sort of huge guy floated up to the top of this room, dying. But he has survived, so he'll continue to be a threat, a presence. And we then witness Paul and Lady Jessica surviving for a night in the desert. With this sort of tent thing that they're able to burrow into a sand dune and survive inside. Quite similar to a sequence in the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie, The World Is Not Enough, I think you'll find. Where he gets trapped out in the snow with a beautiful lady, and is able to use this inflatable thing to survive in the snow in a very similar way, which was amusing. But this is poor Lady Jessica. He's obviously had a load of spice again because he's out in the desert, so he has a load more visions of him and Chani wandering around in the desert together. But then he starts to have these visions of his mother pregnant. He realises that his mother is pregnant. He has these visions of her sort of sat in this space with her. She's sort of covered in tattoos at this point, or covered in writing. And he realises that she's pregnant, and he has these visions of a big battle happening out in the desert. These two sort of armies coming face to face and fighting on Arrakis, and he is, one of the soldiers lifts up their helmet and it reveals it to be Paul. So he's got these visions of a sort of war coming that he's going to participate in. And it all gets a bit sinister where he kind of then has a vision of him and Zendaya Chani returning to Caladan and looking quite sinister and evil. Do you remember this little moment? It's quite odd.
No, I actually don't.
He sort of sees this terrifying vision of him as an evil emperor sort of figure with Zendaya next to him. Maybe a vision of a possible, like, dark, bleak future that kind of scares him. And that's why, do you remember there's a scene where he's kind of yelling and shouting at his mum, at Lady Jessica, for what she's done to him. And for this, so they have a little bit of a tiff. But then the next day, they get out, they've survived, they've made it through the night, and Duncan Idaho has arrived to rescue them. He's managed to escape because he's an absolute G. and
Yeah.
he takes them to the Doctor, the Imperial Arbiter of the Transition, who is set up in an abandoned terraforming station with some Fremen. Are you
There's
all
one
right?
of the best scenes in the film.
Go on.
In a second.
Go on, you take over.
Well, no, well, like they're there and there are people outside playing some kind of game.
Yeah.
And they of course they're talking about something. I'm not really sure what, but then silence, total silence.
Yeah.
And that's I remember that in Sicario as well. He's very good at silence, and there's this like moment where these people, so there's this big hole and you think they're safe because, you know, they must be safe for at least 5 minutes, but he doesn't allow us to relax in this film.
Yeah.
And then this total silence, and then these people, I don't know who they are, but they must be the empire people. They lower themselves down with these what are they called, cords or something.
Yeah, sort of they abseil
And I
down.
thought that scene was, first of all, incredible, but also I was so tense at that point because it was just so quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody was like holding their breaths in the cinema, just like.
But the Sarduka do arrive to attack them at this moment after the silence, and Paul and Lady Jessica and Duncan kind of hold themselves up in this room, shut the door to try and keep the Empire out, and they use this laser to break down the door, and this laser sort of shoots a laser beam straight through that door into the room. And they have to kind of navigate around this laser. Paul and Jessica flee with Kynes, and Duncan makes a last stand to allow them to escape, and sacrifices his life in a thrilling battle with some Sarduka soldiers. Upsetting.
Oh, I was so upset. It was very upsetting. And a little bit of trivia. Apparently the thing that he does when he salutes Paul, so that the doors close and he salutes Paul, he puts this his sword, it touches his heart and then his head, and he says that's a Kali move where you put your hand on your heart and put it on your head. That's to Timothée in the movie, but that's to my son in real life.
Oh, I like it.
But I was in bits when that happened because I didn't want him to die. I forgot he died. My mum was like, I knew he's like, but I can't handle it.
Yeah, fair play.
It's a bit like Beth in Little Women.
Well, you know it's going to happen, but it doesn't stop it from being upsetting.
Yeah, tragic. Yeah.
So, okay. So they sort of escape. It all gets a bit chaotic at this point in the movie, so it's a bit hard to keep track. But Duncan gets killed. Kynes goes out into the desert.
I'm amazed that we managed to go through without any confusion until
now. I know. But it all gets a bit chaotic. But Kynes goes out and tries to. She is gonna ride a sandworm away. Basically, she has these big hooks that she's gonna use to ride a sandworm, and she sets up this device that's going to attract a sandworm that's sort of pounding in the desert sand. And a sandworm starts making its way, but before it can arrive, she gets attacked by some Sarduka soldiers, and basically she's able to sacrifice herself to kill these soldiers. A sandworm turns up and eats them all, basically. Got to be careful when it comes to sandworms. They're dangerous business. And then Paul and Jessica have survived, but they need to escape on foot. So they attempt to, what do they call it? Do a sand walk?
Yeah, where they have to walk in a certain way so they're not detected by the sandworms.
They have to walk without rhythm.
Yeah.
It won't attract the worm.
Yeah.
Which is, do you remember what song has that lyric?
It's the Time Warp. I don't know.
No, there's a Fatboy Slim song called "Weapon of Choice."
Ah, Yeah.
And I only realised recently that lyric
Oh
in
my-
that song is a reference to Dune, because it's this repeated line in the song of like, walk without rhythm and it won't attract
Yeah.
the worm. If you walk without rhythm, it
Oh
won't
my
attract the
goodness.
worm.
Wow.
It's the one with the music video of Christopher Walken dancing around in the hotel. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do it this. You can do it that. You can do it this. You can do it that. Walk without rhythm, and it won't attract the worm. Anyway, I just think that's a cool, weird Dune reference that I never realised was a Dune reference until quite
That's
recently.
amazing.
But Paul and Jessica walk without rhythm. But unfortunately, they do eventually attract the worm, and they have to make a run for it to some rocks. And there's a pretty fantastic scene where they make it to these rocks and the sandworm comes up. And again, we get this sense of scale that Denis Villeneuve is capable of doing, where this sandworm comes up out of the ground, and they've designed, and I think that this is very intentional, they've designed the sandworms in such a way that their teeth look like an eye, like the mouth of the sandworm looks like an eye, like where the teeth is the iris and then the hole between the teeth is the pupil, and it sort of is able to manipulate its teeth to look like a pupil dilating, and it almost so it appears as if it's looking at Paul, which is such a just incredible incredible moment. They've absolutely destroyed it with the design of the sandworm in this film. And then it gets drawn away by some Fremen who then capture them. And it's Stilgar. Stilgar recognises Paul, won't allow the other Fremen to murder him. And he's going to sort of basically take Lady Jessica and Paul with them. But there's another Fremen called Jamis who dismisses this and wants to kill Paul and Jessica and loot their bodies. Paul recognises Jamis as a man that he's seen in his visions, and Jessica then asks if Jessica wants the Fremen to help them get back to Caladan, the planet that they came from, and is like, you're in touch with smugglers, etc. You must know way off the planet. We need to get back to our home planet. And Paul is like, no. And this is where Paul starts to sort of, the first beginnings of Paul becoming the Kwisatz Haderach, or, the who he's destined to be, start emerging here, where he sort of starts to take control and starts to own his sort of fate, and says, no, we came here to learn about desert power. We're going to learn about desert power. We're going to stay with the Fremen. I'm staying on this planet. We are here for a reason. And there's a moment here where Stilgar wants to take Paul but doesn't want to take Jessica because he thinks she's weak, and then she sort of proves to him that she's not weak, and I think he realises that she's a Bene Gesserit, and is going to take both of them to the Sietch, which is where they live, but Jamis doesn't like this, challenges Jessica to a duel, doesn't want her to go, and Paul agrees to be Jessica's champion and fight Jamis. Then we start to meet Chani, played by Zendaya, who actually finally gets some speaking lines on camera in this movie that she was sold as being the star of, or one of the stars of, and she gives him this dagger made from the tooth of a sandworm, a Shai-Hulud, and that's something that Paul had sort of envisioned happening. And then they have this duel, and this is and it's quite a quiet moment for the film to end on. This is the last action sequence in the movie, really. Yeah. Is just this fight scene between Paul and Jamis, where Paul is very reluctant to kill Jamis, kind of defeats him a couple of times, holds a knife at his neck, and is like, give up, I've defeated you, and has to have it explained to him by Stilgar that that's not how a duel works for the Fremen. No. This is going to go until one of them is dead. So Paul kills Jamis. Really sad. Yeah, which he's never done before. He's never murdered or killed anyone before. But he has to. And then he's defeated Jamis. He's welcomed into the fold of the Fremen. He starts making his way across the sand with Chani and Stilgar and the rest of the Fremen and Lady Jessica. He sees in the distance somebody riding on the back of a sandworm, and Zendaya turns around and says to him, "This is only the beginning. Credits."
Yeah.
And that is Dune Part 1.
That is Dune Part 1. Thank goodness there's a Dune Part 2.
I know, it was up in the air, and particularly when Warner Brothers announced that all of their theatrical releases this year were going to go on to HBO Max at the same time, and a lot of their directors, including Denis Villeneuve, were very upset about this.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve had said a few times in interviews that he worried that this was going to affect the chances of Part 2 being made, that he wasn't going to be able, it was going to make the film appear to be a failure. But luckily, it did. It didn't break the bank. It didn't do as well as, say, a Marvel movie has done this year, etc., etc. But it made a good chunk of money, and definitely did well enough for Warner Brothers to quite quickly turn around and say, no, yeah, we're definitely going to make Part 2. So Part 2 is coming, along with a series for HBO Max about the Bene Gesserit. So that's an interesting.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I wonder what that's going to be like, because I'm assuming it's not going to have Denis Villeneuve making it. So I wonder how that world will be when presented by maybe somebody who is not necessarily lesser, but just has a different voice. So I'll be interested to see that. But Part 2 is definitely happening. Denis Villeneuve is returning to make it. I'm assuming all of the principal cast are returning, and it's it's due out in 2023, which Denis Villeneuve has said is quite a tight turnaround. But I don't know if I could physically wait longer than that. So I'm glad that it's coming. What do you think?
It's amazing. It's amazing. Like, it's a very complicated story. It's very complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of it's very serious, but Denis Villeneuve is a master.
Yeah.
I said it in Sicario, like his wide pan shots are amazing, and the way that he did this, even if you didn't understand a thing, it's just a beautiful film to watch.
Yeah.
The acting is amazing. Everybody is incredible in it. I felt really nervous and excited and anxious, and I felt vibrations and those voices. Like, the way he managed to do this is amazing. He's an incredible filmmaker. He got an incredible cast to play this for him, and the score is amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. The score is by Hans Zimmer, who has I think produced the best work he's ever done, and he normally works with Christopher Nolan, and he turned down Tenet in order to make this film, because he's a lifelong fan of Dune, and you can tell how sort of committed he is to the film. You can tell that he really has put his all into doing it. Yeah, you're right. The score is incredible,
and it's a love project. I think Denis Villeneuve has always wanted to do this, and he did it. And I can't wait for the second one. I absolutely well, first of all, I absolutely love this film, but also 2.5 hours flew by.
Yeah.
I've never been so invested in something that I could just spend 2.5 hours watching it without thinking, oh, when is this film going to end?
Yeah, agreed. It's so like, good.
I love Marvel movies, but sometimes after the 2-hour mark, I'm like, oh, okay, so what's going to happen next? But it's so, I don't know, I absolutely loved it. So,
also, what I love about this film is that, like the big movies nowadays, the huge blockbusters that make a lot of money and get a lot of people talking, are the Marvel films. And we're both sort of committed fans of those films. But one thing about them is that they don't individually tend to have their own identities. They do a little bit, Thor Ragnarok is a Taika Waititi movie, and it feels like a Taika Waititi movie, but it's in the Marvel conveyor belt of films, and the Marvel movies seem to largely exist for as long as it takes another one to come out, kind of thing. Whereas I think what Denis Villeneuve has made here is a blockbuster film that's going to sort of exist within the canon of cinema for as long as cinema exists. I think he's made sort of a film that will be remembered for a very, very long time, and has its own completely unique identity and voice. It doesn't feel, for a film filled with so many ideas that Star Wars ended up taking for itself, it doesn't feel like a rip-off of Star Wars. It feels like a completely different type of movie. And I think he's absolutely it's a masterpiece. It's a 5-star masterpiece, and I loved it so much. And particularly the second time I watched it, I was like, this is a 2.5 hour long film. This is a long movie. I only watched it like a week ago. Am I gonna am I going to like it again? And it genuinely flew by a second time. Like, despite spending ultimately 5 hours watching it, I was still really engrossed by it by the end of the second viewing. So I think it's a masterpiece. One last thing I want to do before we leave. I've got one more MyTube that's relevant to this to share with you.
Okay.
Okay, have you ever seen the video called Zendaya is Meechee?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to send you a link to this video. It's under a minute long, but I think that you will enjoy it in the same way I do. And when Zendaya turns up in films now playing characters with odd names like Channy in this film, I always think of this video. So yeah, I'll send you the link to it now, and you can tell me when you're ready to watch it.
Okay. Now I am ready to press play when you are.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
What is this?
It's just a song a guy's made.
I thought it was going to be related to Dune instead of just this guy. Okay.
It's just a funny song. It's just funny because that film, I think it's called Littlefoot or something, none of the characters in it are famous, but they've made all these character posters being like, oh, look, Danny DeVito's playing Dorgal and Zendaya's playing Meechee and etc., etc. But it's funny because of this song. Zendaya is Meechee. LeBron James is Gwangi.
How many buckets would you give this film?
I would give it 5 buckets full of spice out of 5.
Very nice.
Yeah, what about
Me
you?
too.
Good. Good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, full brim, full to the brim of spice.
Nice. Right, well, that was episode 55 of the Culture Bucket podcast. I hope that you've had a blast listening to it. If you've seen the movie Dune, I hope you've enjoyed our discussion of it. If you haven't seen the movie Dune, I hope we've convinced you that it's worth watching, because, to be honest, the plot of it that we've gone through is secondary to how beautiful every single shot in the movie is. So, like, there's still so much reason for anyone to watch it, even if they haven't, seen it yet. It's just great. It's so good. Next week, we're going to be doing a deep dive on an album that we haven't done before. We're going to be going through the Idols 2021 release, Crawler.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. That episode is in the can, and I really enjoyed recording that, so I hope that people like listening to it. We'd really love feedback on, every episode, but particularly that one, because we haven't really done anything like that before, so we'd love to know. Anyone who listens to it, what do you think of it? And you can find email addresses for us and other places on social media, such as Instagram, to find us and see what we're doing on the show notes for this and every single episode of the podcast. So please do go and check us out on Instagram, and you can find us on other places as well, but we're definitely most active on Instagram. And let us know what you think if you've seen Dune. And coming up pretty soon is going to be our best of 2021 episode. We haven't recorded that yet, so we'd love to get some lists from you guys to read out, so please do send those in so that we can have some listener contributions. That would be wonderful as well. Yeah, please send them in by the 16th of December. That's your deadline. The 16th of December is your deadline for getting in your best of lists, and we really do want some to read, so please do send some in. So, but any best of film, best of music, best of whatever, send it in by the 16th of December, and you'll be read out on the old podcast. So do that. Thank you so much. Love you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.